שמע ששיר חדש Okay, hi everybody, thank you for coming, and as always our shir is dedicated for praying for victory of the Chayolim in all fronts of the war, the lasting unity of Am Yisrael, and for all of those whose health has been affected by the war, for the safe return of all hostages. Trump had said last Shabbos at 12 was the deadline for the return of all of the hostages, or else all hell will break loose. Obviously, in Hashem's Gehenna, all Gehenna will indeed break loose, but in Olam Hazeh, we are unfortunately still working with the gradualism of dribs and drabs, but at least B'ezras Hashem, that process is continuing. We hope it will be accelerated in a good way. In addition, the Aliyat Neshamot, Yitzchak Hirsh ben Eliezer, Shulamit bat Chaim Mordechai. Her third yahrzeit is the 22nd of Shvat, dedicated by Lynn and Larry Finson. Shulamit bat Chaim Mordechai is Lynn Finson's mother. She is a woman I actually knew very, very well, a very wonderful, righteous, quiet tzadekes, and we hope that the Divrei Torah should be Le'ilui Nishmata, and we want to thank Lynn and Larry for sponsoring the shir tonight. We have Parshat Mishpatim, and Parshat Mishpatim, for those who like Halacha and like Gemara, Parshat Mishpatim is the way to go because there are so many halachas. All of Maseches Bava Kama is based on Parshat Mishpatim. A lot of Bava Metzia is based on Parshat Mishpatim. Bava Basra, not so much. Bava Basra is based on other parts of the Torah. And it's been well said, Rav Yehuda Cooperman, Zichrono Livracha, the founder and head of Michlala, very, very famous girls' school here in Yerushalayim, once said that any Jew who knows Parshat Mishpatim with Rashi, by definition, is not an Am Haaretz. By definition, that can make him a learned Jew on the most basic level. And but what I want to talk about is this, because what confuses, I'm going to start off with a bit of a technical discussion, but I think it's an important discussion. A lot of people get confused because last week in Parshas Yisro, we read about the preparations for receiving the Torah. Then we have the Aseres HaDibros that the people hear. And then we have Parshas Mishpatim, a lot of commandments. And then we seem to go backwards. The end of Parshas Mishpatim seems to be talking about the preparations before Matan Torah. And it's hard to know exactly how you integrate the end of Parshas Mishpatim with all of the events that happened last week. Again, if you look at it, you'll see that you seem to be going backwards in terms of time. That is one question I want to address. There's another question I want to address too, which is an interesting question. We say over and over and over again, and this is stated in Pirkei Avos, and that's stated in Rashi, in Chumash, that Moshe got the Torah at Sinai. Moshe got the Torah at Har Sinai. Now, problem is, the Sinaitic revelation is in the middle of the Torah. It's in the middle of the book of Shmos. There's a lot of stuff that happens after the Sinaitic revelation, among which are the sin of the golden calf, but not just stories. Not only stories happen, many, many commandments are given in the book of Vayikra, in the book of Bamidbar. Some new commandments are even given in the book of Devarim, which means the Torah was actually given over a 40-year period. So in what sense do we mean that Moshe got the Torah at Sinai? What does that mean exactly? So those are the two questions I want to address. Again, they are a bit technical. Question number one is, how do we interrelate the events at the end of Parshas Mishpatim with Matan Torah? And number two, what do we mean by the claim that Chazal say in many different places that Moshe got the whole Torah at Sinai? What does that mean? So let me talk about the second question first. It is true that Moshe Rabbeinu, after the Ten Commandments, went up to Mount Sinai and stayed on that mountain for 40 days. And then he came down, broke the tablets, etc. And during those 40 days, Chazal say, he got the whole Torah. Now, what does that mean? So, 2 points. First of all, the word Torah itself is a word that is ambiguous. The word Torah does not always mean the same thing in every context it appears. Sometimes Torah means the 5 books of Moses, the actual Chumash, and sometimes Torah means the body of Jewish law. Now, for example, when a person says, I'm learning Torah, it's lav dafka learning Chumash, you could be learning Mishnah, Gemara, Halacha. So here's the thing. When it says Moshe was given the Torah at Sinai, it does not refer to the narrative structures of the Torah. Moshe was not told about Korach, about Meraglim, about Pinchas, because it didn't happen yet. Until those things happened, they didn't happen. Rather, Torah at most means Hashem gave Moshe the 613 commandments and their interpretations. In terms of the narrative structures of the Torah, we have a machlokes. When did Moshe get them and when they were written down? According to one opinion in the Gemara, they were written down shortly after they occurred, meaning after the sin of the golden calf, Moshe was commanded to write word for word by God about the golden calf. After the Meraglim, he was told to write about the Meraglim. After Korach, he was told to write about the Korach. In other words, the Torah as Sefer Torah was compiled over 40 years. Meaning, before Matan Torah, Moshe wrote Al Pi Hashem from Bereshis until Matan Torah, and everything else was written as it was going on. So, meaning the Jewish people did not have a completed Sefer Torah until the day Moshe Rabbeinu died. And there's a machlokas who wrote the last 8 verses about Moshe's death. Did Moshe write them ahead of time? Did Yehoshua write them? That's a machlokas in the Gemara. But the point is, if you were to take a snapshot or a video of the Dor HaMidbar in the middle, did they have a Torah scroll? The answer is they didn't. In fact, they didn't even have a partial Torah scroll, because as far as we know, the Torah was not released to Am Yisrael till it was completed. In other words, in Moshe's tent, there was a bunch of parchments where which he had written down the words of God. That is the view that the Torah was written piecemeal. Now, there's another view that actually says the Torah was written for the first time on the day of Moshe Rabbeinu's death, meaning he didn't write it till the very end. Meaning, if you would look in Moshe's tent, there was no Sefer Torah till the last day of his life. So the idea that Moshe got the Torah at Sinai certainly does not mean he got the Sefer Torah at Sinai. Moshe didn't get a Sefer Torah at all. All he got were the Luchot, which had the Aseres HaDvarim, the 10 Commandments, and the Sefer Torah was either written gradually over 40 years, or it was written all at the very end of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. See, otherwise, it's even logically very ridiculous to look at it the other way, because then it becomes everybody is just an actor in a play. Like, what does Moshe do? Korach. Hey, Korach, according to my script here, you are to stand here where the white tape is, and the ground's going to open up, be a great visual. And the like. I mean, obviously, people are not speaking parts. So it's not possible that there was some written... Again, in Shamayim, God has the celestial Sefer Torah. I'm not dealing with the mystical idea. But on earth, there was no Sefer Torah. It was either written gradually, or it was written at the end of the 40 days. Now, even this needs some more explanation. So what does it mean Moshe got the Torah at Sinai? So Torah does not mean the Sefer Torah. Torah means the 613 commandments. But even that limited explanation doesn't make full sense. Because it's clear, is it not, that mitzvos are given in dribs and drabs throughout the Torah. There are mitzvos, after all, after Matan Torah and Parshas Yisro and Mishpatim, mitzvos are given. But if you're telling me everything was given, then what's the difference between Shatnez, which is written in the book of Devarim, and Shor, the habitual Gorer that's written in Mishpatim? They were all Sinai. What's the difference? Obviously, there is a difference, meaning you read the Chumash, mitzvos are given over time. Mitzvos are given at various occasions. So what do we mean Moshe got everything at Mount Sinai? So the Chazon Ish offers a very, very nice, clear insight as to how to understand this. We have to differentiate between when Moshe got the Torah, meaning mitzvot, and when he was authorized to communicate the Torah to Bnei Yisrael. Moshe was given all of the commandments at Sinai. But for various reasons, and this would be a complicated project because you would have to analyze every case, Hashem did not authorize him to tell Bnei Yisrael various mitzvahs. That's why it always says Moshe got the Torah at Sinai. It does not say Bnei Yisrael got the Torah at Sinai. There were many, many mitzvahs we did not learn about till the last year of Moshe Rabbeinu's life. He got them at Sinai, but they are revealed in dribs and drabs. And in fact, that is the actual meaning of the ubiquitous phrase in the Torah, V'yedaber Hashem el Moshe lemor. Hashem spoke to Moshe saying. The word saying is always a superfluous word. What's saying? So Rashi says, lemor li'achera, meaning that's Hashem's green light to take what you know and now reveal it to the people at various points. Okay, so again, this is just basic pshat, but I think a lot of people misunderstand the idea of Moshe getting the Torah b'Sinai. Number one, it does not mean Sefer Torah. And number two, it does not refer to when the Jewish people heard it. So, as a result, you can read the Chumash kipshut el mamash, meaning the mitzvos in Mishpatim were given to the Jewish people right then. Other mitzvos are given to the Jewish people later, over time, when there's a Mishkan. And indeed, when the Torah says they got the mitzvos, that's when they got the mitzvos. And Moshe Rabbeinu got it all under 40 days. The only thing I want to point out is, Parshat Mishpatim must be very, very special, because Moshe got them even before the 40 days. In other words, the 10 Commandments and the Mishpatim are before Moshe ascended the mountain. In other words, that shows you a special chashivas. Moshe is still on the ground when God is giving him those commandments. And then the end of the Parsha says Moshe climbed the mountain for 40 days. So in a sense, in the hierarchy of mitzvahs, you see a very interesting thing, that some mitzvahs were so significant that Moshe got them even before the ascent to Mount Sinai, and the assumption is the Jewish people got them as well. At that point, he communicated it to the Jewish people. Okay, so I think it is important. So the mitzvot that were not mentioned in the Torah until later, the Jewish people didn't know until later. They were not keeping those mitzvot. They were not keeping those mitzvahs because they weren't given yet. Moshe knew, but he was not yet told to reveal it to Bnei Yisrael for various reasons. Now, I'm not giving you an explanation why, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu had cheshbonos why various mitzvos were to become operative at various times. With this, the Chazon Ish offers a beautiful explanation as to the 4 places where Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the halacha. If you remember, Chazal say, based on the Chumash itself, that there are 4 places where Moshe was seemingly ignorant of the halacha. One was he didn't know what should be done to the guy who was gathering wood on Shabbos. And he had to ask Hashem what the punishment is, and Hashem said stoning. The other was similarly the other bad guy who cursed Hashem, blasphemed Hashem. Moshe didn't know. The third is the people who were tamei and they were not able to bring the Korban Pesach, the second year after they left Egypt. And Moshe didn't know if there's a makeup. And he asked Hashem, and Hashem said, there is the Pesach Sheni, there is the makeup 1 month later. And the fourth is the daughters of Tzlafchad. This is at the end of the 40 years, where their father died without any sons. And Moshe Rabbeinu didn't know the halacha if daughters have inheritance rights when there are no sons, or it goes to the decedent's brothers. Right? Slavcha's brothers were claiming they should get his portion in Eretz Israel. The daughters were saying, we should get our father's portion. Moshe doesn't know. He asks Hashem. Hashem says the answer. Now, people ask the question like this. It's a good question. If Moshe Rabbeinu got all of the commandments during the 40 days he was in Mount Sinai, and he was there twice, right, first time, second time, that means he already was told there's Pesach Sheni. He was already told in Maharal Shabbos gets skila, a stoning. He was already told that a megadef, that a blasphemer, gets skila. He was already told that daughters inherit. So what is it that Moshe Rabbeinu doesn't know that he has to ask Hashem if Moshe got the Torah, even if Torah means 613 mitzvahs, not narratives? Yeah, so Moshe didn't know there would be a story of the daughters of Slavcha. But the din that daughters inherit was part of the Sinaitic revelation. So what is it that he didn't know? So some Midrashim say Moshe forgot. Of course he knew. He forgot because he lost his temper, different reasons. But the Chazon Ish says, very, very pashut. Moshe knows the halacha in all four of those cases. But Moshe was not yet given the green light to tell Bnei Yisrael. So the problem is, Moshe has a real dilemma. Am I allowed to paskin on the basis of inside information? Hashem gave me private information. I was not yet given permission to reveal this information. What do I do? Answer, you go to the boss and ask for clearance. He goes to Hashem and says, is this the time? Is this the occasion to reveal the halacha? And Hashem says, this is the right time to reveal the halacha. So it's not a question of ignorance, it's not a question of forgetting, and it's not a question of Moshe not knowing the halacha. He knew the halacha, but there had not yet been a lamor aspect of the halacha. Okay, so again, this is a technical idea, but I think it's fairly important to understand in this because it leads to all sorts of mess-ups and confusions. I mean, we have among our students in our Sameach, who Baruch Hashem are tzaddikim, wonderful people, but they'll be giving me a story about, didn't Hashem give every word of the Gemara at Mount Sinai? And, things at some point don't make sense. The words of Rabbi Akiva, he's quoting from an earlier script. What's going on? I mean, who gave him the script? First of all, you weren't allowed to write down the oral law. So there was an oral tradition that Rabbi Akiva would say something on a certain day, and Rabbi Akiva is told by somebody, who's the somebody, that on Monday, right? So obviously, we're talking about the roots of things were given at Sinai, and the elaborations and the like are by the Chachamim later. Okay, that's the oral law, but even the written law, Moshe got it, but it was not communicated till various times. Now, with respect to the end, the first of my two questions, I addressed the second question first. The first of my questions about at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. So what did we have? Last week we had the Ten Commandments, and then we had some laws about building a Mizbeach out of stone, and then we segue into the Mishpatim. So Moshe is getting them before he goes up to Mount Sinai. And then Hashem says to Moshe, build a Mizbeach, build an altar, and sprinkle half of the blood of the korbanos on the Mizbeach, and sprinkle the other half on the people. And Moshe builds the Mizbeach. And it says the following at the end of Parshas Mishpatim. He took the Sefer Habris. He took the book of the covenant. It says he took a book of the covenant and he read it in front of the people. And they said the famous verse. It's not by Yisro. The verse everybody knows is in Mishpatim. Kol asher diber Hashem. Whatever Hashem says, Naaseh, we will do, v'nishma. So, let me point out, there's a huge machlokes, Rashi and the Ramban, how to understand the idea of building the Mizbeach, sprinkling the blood, and the Jewish people saying, Naaseh v'nishma, and what is the book of the covenant. Rashi, based on the Gemara in Masechah Shabbos, actually says that whole ending of Parshas Mishpatim is out of order. And Rashi applies the rule, Ein muktam u'meuchar b'Torah, right? This is a famous rule of Chazal, that the Torah does not always speak in chronological order. There are events in the Torah that are reported later that actually happened earlier. And therefore, even though the Mizbeach, the blood, the Anaseh Nishma, is recorded in the Torah after the Mishpatim, which is after the Ten Commandments, in point of fact, it was before the Aseret Adibros, and the Gemara says it happened on the 5th of Sivan. We got the Aseret Adibros in either the 6th or the 7th of Sivan. That itself is a machlokes. But the B'nias Mizbeach, according to Rashi and Chazal, was the 5th of Sivan. So the famous Naseh v'Nishma that we always say happened before the Torah was given to us, indeed follows the view of Rashi and Chazal. Okay? Now, based on that, meaning if you make it pre-Matan Torah, so what is the book of the covenant that Moshe is reading to them? What is the book that Moshe is reading? What does that book say? So Rashi explains, this is the Torah from Bereshis up until that point, meaning Moshe Rabbeinu is reading to them Chumash Bereshis, and he's reading to them the events of Yetziat Mitzrayim up to Matan Torah. He's not reading other parts of the Sefer Torah because that didn't happen yet. So the Sefer HaBris is Bereshis ad Matan Torah. Now I have to say, Rashi is going like the opinion that the Torah was written in a piecemeal fashion, meaning if you go like the other opinion in the Gemara, you got a real problem, because like the other opinion, nothing of the Torah was written down until the day of Moshe Rabbeinu's death. So you didn't have a Chumash Bereshis until that point. So like the other opinion that the Torah was not written until the very end, there's a bit of an enigma. What is the book of the covenant? So the Ibn Ezra suggests it's really not the Chumash itself. It was a book of blessings and curses, like an admonition in writing to keep the Torah, but it was not part of the Sefer Torah itself. Now, Ramban, and although maybe we shouldn't be ranking commentaries, but in the standard hierarchical ranking of Meforshim, Ramban is considered to be the second greatest commentary next to Rashi, and Ramban himself acknowledges the greatness of Rashi at the first rank. In fact, it's quite amazing for Rashi to write the definitive commentary on Chumash, less so on Nach. On Nach, he also has a commentary it's not as definitive, and to write his commentary on Gemara, which is frankly unbelievable, because the Babylonian Talmud, Rabbi Natan remarked, the Chumash theoretically can be understood on some level even without Rashi. We would miss a tremendous amount, but we would have the Chumash even without Rashi. We would not have the Talmud without Rashi. Had there not been a commentary of Rashi on the Gemara, kaput, that would have been the end. The Babylonian Talmud would have fundamentally been lost to Klal Yisrael. So it's very, very remarkable. And again, the more you learn Rashi, the more you have an appreciation for the brilliance of his expression, the clarity, the brevity, the fact that he'll supply like connecting words between sentences or phrases, and just a word here, a word there, like illuminate, just very, very amazing. But anyway, the Ramban does argue with Rashi in many places, and the Ramban in his Hakdama, in his introduction, almost apologizes. He says, I will sometimes be taking issue with Rabbeinu Shlomo, that's Rashi, and I do so with tremendous kavod and deference to his greatness. And then he remarks, it's interesting, that he's also going to argue with the Ibn Ezra. And he said, with the Ibn Ezra, he says, he quotes a pasuk in Mishlei, that better a brother who gives rebuke than a person who flatters. Meaning he says, Ben Ezra, I'm just going to rebuke, when I differ with him. So the attitude was very, very different. The interesting things the Ramban does is, the Ramban does not like the rule that the Torah is not in chronological order. He can't reject the rule because the Chazal say it, but the Ramban goes out of his way to reconstruct things to be chronological, and whenever possible. Sometimes it's not possible, and then he kind of gives in. And the Ramban actually says the whole building of the Mizbeach and the whole Nasa v'Nishma is after the Ten Commandments and after the Mishpatim, right before Moshe went up on the mountain for 40 days and 40 nights. And therefore, he's not following Chazal, that the Mizbeach was built on the 5th of Sivan. He's following the view that it was built on the 6th or the 7th, when they actually heard the Aseret HaDibros, and we read the Psukim Keseder. And again, this is consistently the Ramban's opinion, that we try to assume that the Torah is written in chronological sequence. Okay, Beseder. According to Ramban, though, it does turn out that the famous immortal words, everything the Jewish people said is not Nasa v'Nishma. Everything Hashem says, Nasa v'Nishma, were not uttered, according to the Ramban, before the Aseret HaDibros. They were uttered after the Aseret HaDibros and after the Mishpatim. They were not a pre-Matan Torah commitment. Now, according to the Ramban, what is the meaning of the Book of the Covenant? So here the Ramban says, this is almost like Rashi, except he wrote a little more, meaning it's Bereshis, Yetziat Mitzrayim, and the Mishpatim. In other words, because the Nasa v'Nishma is after the Mishpatim, right? So according to the Ramban, your Sefer HaBrit is a little bigger than Rashi's Sefer HaBrit. There's a fascinating thought that Maharal of Prague says. Maharal's first Sefer that he wrote as a young man is the Sefer Gur Aryeh. Now, Gur Aryeh is actually a commentary on Rashi on Chumash. Right, that was the Maharal's first Sefer. And of course, like anything else, the Maharal goes off on his own ideas. And many of the ideas that he develops at much more length in his later Sfarim, you find them in Gur Aryeh. That's why people often ask, if they want to learn Maharal, where is a good place to start? There are different answers you can give to that. But many suggest Gur Aryeh because Gur Aryeh are short, because it's appended to Rashi's comments. So sometimes the problem people have with Maharal is the ideas are very long and complicated. In Gur Aryeh, you can get exposed to them in short, digestible bits. And then when you have enough knowledge of the Maharal style and approach to things, you can then see the elaboration in the other Sfarim. That's just a little hint as to where one might start in the huge, huge corpus of Maharal. But the Maharal deals with the following issue. There is an interesting Gemara in YIBONEH that says that the whole experience of Matan Torah was a mass conversion of the Jewish people. We became converts. We converted to Judaism by accepting the Torah. In fact, the Gemara in YIBONEH says the laws of conversion of a ger are derived from what the Jewish people did at Sinai. What are the three requirements, at least of a male convert? Circumcision, bris milah, that a woman wouldn't have, but a man would have bris milah, tevilah, immersion in a mikveh, and accepting the commandments. Right? Those are the three requirements for conversion. Well, the Jewish people did bris milah before they left Mitzrayim. Went to the mikveh, that's the reference in the Chumash to washing your clothes, which really means immersing your body and your clothes. And Nasa v'Nishma is accepting the Mitzvot. So the Jewish people became converts at Sinai. That's what the Gemara says. In fact, that's the connection, one of the connections between the story of Rus and Shavuos. Because on Matan Torah, we all became converts. We want to read the story of what a sincere convert is. And that's the story of Rus. So now the Maharal asks the following question. and this may seem very strange, but this is the halacha. We know there's a rule in the laws of conversion that a convert is treated as a newly created entity who has no halachic relationship with any of their relatives. Now, again, I'm not referring to love and affection. Of course, emotional bonds are going to be there. But halachically, a ger is not related to his father, to his mother, to his son from before, to his daughter. And this has some very surprising ramifications. That actually means, under Torah law, if a mother and son convert to Judaism, the mother and son are allowed to get married under Torah law. If a father and daughter convert to Judaism, if a brother and sister convert to Judaism, because they are newly born entities, they are not halachically related. They are permitted to marry. Now, I don't want to get arrested for fostering incest, so let me hasten to add that rabbinically this is prohibited because of appearances and the like. So halacha, it's not allowed. But under Torah law, it would be allowed based on the principle of ger shenitgayer, ki katan shenolad is like newly born. Now this is a halacha. This is a well-known halacha. So the Maharal raises the following question. If all of the Jews at the time of Matan Torah had the status of converts, it would appear that at least that first generation had no incest restrictions whatsoever. Now, the kids who are born Jewish afterwards, they are related to each other. But that first generation, brother, sister, mother, son, father, daughter. So the Maharal says, is it at all possible that whole generation in the desert, or at least those who were around at the time of Matan Torah, did not have the prohibitions of incest based on gerus? So the Maharal says an interesting chidush. It's a chidush. Maharal says the rule that conversion severs relationships that does not apply or did not apply to the conversion of Matan Torah. That conversion was an exception to the rule. Why is that so? Because the rule that conversion severs relationships only applies to a volitional conversion, where you had a choice to either do it or not do it. So if you choose to do it, you're cutting. The gerus of Matan Torah was not volitional. The Gemara in Masechet Shabbos says that God held a mountain over our heads, and he said, I'm giving you a choice. If you accept the Torah, that's great. If you don't accept the Torah, you'll be a pancake, you're going to die. Now, normally, a compelled conversion is a nullity. So essentially, this is the only case, meaning there is no case of a forced conversion other than Matan Torah itself. And the Maharal is Machadesh that when there is a conversion that is not volitional, the rule of ger shenitzgayer kekatan shenolad dami does not apply. It's a big chiddush. And the Maharal says that this was a coerced conversion. Now, the problem is this. On one hand, the statement that God held the mountain over our heads is in the Gemara itself. That is in the Gemara. Maharal didn't make it up. But you do have a big problem. How can we describe it as coercion? The Jewish people are praised because they said, we will do and we will listen. I mean, they're praised for the fact that they accepted it. So the truth is, the Maharal himself answers this question in a different context. Maharal says the following. Avada, it's Parshat, that the conversion of Matan Torah must have been volitional. If it wouldn't have been volitional, it would have been worthless. What's the point of Hashem putting a gun to your head and saying, convert or else? But the Maharal says, after we accepted the Torah volitionally, Hashem shows us it was something that had to be done, because otherwise there would be no purpose in the creation of heaven and earth. In other words, It's as if to say Hashem created the world, the universe, so that there would be a nation that accepted the Torah. If the Jewish people wouldn't have accepted the Torah, the universe would cease to exist. But God couldn't tell them that. God couldn't have told them, if you don't accept the Torah, the universe will cease to exist, because that would have made them being compelled. So God didn't tell them how momentous their decision was until after they accepted it volitionally. Very, very interesting. In other words, the concept would be, Kaviyachol is like Hashem is mopping his brow and saying, wow, really, really lucky you made that right decision. Had you not made the right decision, the universe would have been destroyed. And if we say back, well, why didn't you tell me? The answer is no. If I would have told you, your acceptance wouldn't have been worth very much. I needed to have you accept it willingly, but to then understand it is something you had to do. Very fascinating. That's how he reconciles the idea of being forced with the idea of Nasa v'nishma. Yeah, we certainly accepted it out of free will. But Hashem says you're forced in the sense that had you not made the right decision, the world would have ceased to exist. This is the Maharal. Okay. Now, be it as it may, the Nasa v'nishma are critical words, right? And Chazal make the point that the order is very significant here. Because Nasa means we will do, and Nishma means we will then hear what you're offering, meaning this is the idea of unconditional acceptance of the will of God. You see, if a person says, Nishma v'naseh, let's hear what you're offering, and then we'll do it, that implies conditionality. Let's hear your offer, and then we'll consider it. When you say, Naseh v'nishma, what you're doing is you're saying, we will do. I don't even know what you want me to do. Whatever it is, we will do. Now tell me what that is. It's not just word order. It's a totally different thing. Nishma v'naseh would have been conditional. Let's hear what you want. Naseh v'nishma is giving Hashem a blank check, and that's what Hashem wanted. Total hispatlut, total submission. That's the greatness of Naseh v'nishma. We commit ourselves to the Ratzon Hashem without even knowing what it is. Rav Yosef, he probably gets it from somewhere, but I don't remember what source he got it from, says that is the daily meaning of tefillin that the men put on every day except Shabbos, where first we put on the tefillin of the hand, and then we put on the tefillin of the head. The hand represents action, doing. The head represents understanding, cogitation. And we put on the hand tefillin because we're committing ourselves to do the will of God even before I understand it. And then I try to understand it. I try to learn and the like. So every day a man puts on tefillin is a mini Kabbalah Satorah of Naseh v'nishma. Tefillin shel yad before the tefillin shel rosh. Right? This is what we say, that tefillin is Matan Torah, Kabbalah Satorah, accepting the Torah. So Naseh v'nishma is a very, very big deal because it is the unconditional acceptance, which is an interesting paradox within Judaism. You know, there are religions, in fact, many say Christianity was commonly that way, in which you were specifically told not to try to understand things, not to try to even read the Bible. And in fact, for many, many centuries in Europe, most of the population was illiterate, and the church actually encouraged illiteracy. They were not pushing for people to know how to read because they didn't want people to read the Bible in the original or whatever, or even in English, because that would undermine the authority of the church, who wanted to be the only people explaining. Judaism, by far, is the only religion that makes, I could say, almost a fetish with, we want everybody to learn and to study and to read. We want you to read the Chumash and read the Nach and read the Mishnah, read the Gemara. We want everybody to be a Talmid Chacham, everybody to be learned. Right? We don't want, the wisdom of the Torah to be the property of the elite leaders who will tell you what everything means, and you're simply, your mind and your thought and your mastery is not relevant. This is why Judaism is such a democratic religion in that sense, that the gateways of wisdom and Torah are open to everybody. So on one hand, we say, understand, try to learn and understand. And at the same time, we say, but recognize that you're limited. You try to understand, but you also know you'll never fully understand. And therefore, side by side, with the tremendous emphasis on learning, is also the emphasis that even if it doesn't make sense to me, I accept. I am mevatel. This is what Chassidus calls Kabbalas Ol, the acceptance. I mean, it's borrowed from Chazal, the acceptance of the yoke. And that means, doesn't make sense to me, I do it anyway. Right? It's kind of a paradox within Judaism. A free thinker says, whatever makes sense to me, I'll do. A Catholic might say, nothing makes sense to me, and I'll do. The other way around. A Jew says, I try to make sense of it, and I work hard on it, but if not, I'm going to do it anyway. Nasa v'nishma. But the question I want to raise is this. The final question I want to raise is that in last week's Parsha, which clearly is before the Ten Commandments, there's a pasuk that's almost similar. It says, Vayanu kol ha'am yachdav, all of the nation answered in unison, Kol asher diber Hashem, all that God has spoken, na'aseh, we will do. And you almost feel like correcting the Baal Koreh, nishma. But no, the Baal Koreh is right. In Parshas Yisro, it says, Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh. And you're scratching your head last week and saying, where is that famous pasuk? Well, don't be too impatient. The famous pasuk is a week later, in Parshas Mishpatim. Kol asher diber Hashem na'aseh v'nishma. According to Rashi, that was also said before Matan Torah. According to Ramban, it was said later, after Matan Torah. But still, what is the significance of the two formulations? One, they simply say, whatever God says we will do. The other is the additional twist. Whatever Hashem says, Nasa, we will do, v'nishman, will endeavor to understand. So, and again, whether this is after Matan Torah or before Matan Torah is not going to make a difference, but why are these two acceptances of God's Torah phrased in a slightly different way? So there's a beautiful explanation from the Meshech Chochmah. And he says that everybody knows the famous Gemara in Maseches Makos, that the Torah is comprised as a whole of 613 mitzvos. 248 of them are positive mitzvos. Mitzvos aseh, thou shalt do things. 365 are negative commandments, thou shalt not do things. And Chazal even correlate them to human anatomy. The 248 correspond to 248 bones in the body, and each positive mitzvah gives life to a bone. We don't mean in a physical sense. A person could be a tzaddik and still have arthritis, but in some spiritual way, it gives vibrancy. And the 365 negatives correspond to the sinews or ligaments of the body, in which violating the Torah can somehow deprive life. Now people ask sometimes, well, is there a listing of which mitzvos correspond to which bones and which sinews? Can we actually have a map? So the truth of the matter is, in Chazal there is no such map, but there actually are a few svarim. It's hard to find them. And And of course, they're much later. These are from Achronim, so it's speculation. But there are different Achronim who actually try to map out what connects. Now, the Makor of 613. How do the rabbis know there are 613? Because if you just count it, you'll get you're not going to get 613. You have to figure out ways of combining and the like. So Chazal say it's from the verse Torah tziva lanu Moshe. Moshe gave us Torah. Torah b'gematria is 611. Moshe gave us 611. So how do you get 613? 611 we heard from Moshe, but 2 commandments. I am Hashem who took you out of Mitzrayim, and you shall not have any other gods. We heard from God. So therefore, 611 plus 2 is the 613. Okay. Now, there's a famous question about this. If the mitzvos correspond to human anatomy in a spiritual way, then no human being, no matter how righteous, can ever escape being defective. Because there has never been a Jew who was able to keep the 613 mitzvos. Some mitzvos belong to men and not women. Some mitzvos are women and not men. Some mitzvos are only for Kohanim. Some mitzvos only apply when there's a Beis HaMikdash. Many mitzvos only apply in Eretz Yisrael. Now, if we stop and said, well, there are 613 mitzvahs. If you can do it, you can do it. If you can't do it, you can't do it. That's fine. But when you're correlating it to the human body, in a spiritual sense, what you're saying is, no matter how righteous you are condemned to be a spiritual defective. You are defective. There is no way you can achieve shleimus. There is no way you can achieve perfection. There is something missing here. That seems unfair. If HaKadosh Baruch Hu created a Torah where every single mitzvah is needed for a spiritual vibrancy of the bones and the sinews, then Hashem made a system. I mean, granted, we in our imperfection do plenty of averos, that's fine. But for Hashem to create a system that no matter how righteous you are, you're going to be defective. There seems something wrong with that. So how can I as an individual keep all of the 613 commandments? Even when there's a Beis HaMikdash, it's impossible. Kal v'chomer, when there's no Beis HaMikdash. So this is a well-known question, and there are 2 answers that are given to the question. Answer number 1 is Torah learning. Because Chazal say, for example, that if I learn about the korbanos, it's as if I brought the korbanos. So it's lav dafka korbanos. I can learn about those areas of Torah. So besides the mitzvah of Torah learning, I get the light of the commandments through Talmud Torah. Talmud Torah allows me to connect to commandments that I'm otherwise not allowed, wouldn't be able to keep. That's why the Chaim writes that it's important to learn even the mitzvahs that don't apply today. And on some level, they have something, a mitzvah that I could do today, I can get the light of that mitzvah by doing it. A mitzvah I can't do today, the only access I have to that mitzvah is Torah learning. I'll give you an example. I mean, this may sound absurd, but it makes the point. Giving a get is actually one of the 613 mitzvahs. It's a conditional mitzvah. If a man decides he doesn't want to be married, etc., he shall give a get. It's one of the 613, which means there must be a get bone in the body. There must be a bone in the body that gets its vibrancy from get. Meaning, if I don't give a get, I'm missing something. So, it's a little peculiar. Guy comes home one night, from guy, a nice marriage, says to his wife, honey, you're great, but I have a defect in my neshama because I have not done the mitzvah of giving a get. So, I just got to do it. Well, We would call that certifiably crazy behavior. But what's the answer? There is a get bone. The answer is learn Maseches Gittin. That's how you get it. Your get bone is going to be rectified by Talmud Torah. And therefore, even if I can't do a mitzvah by action, I can do it by learning and the like. I'm thinking maybe that's why Maseches Gittin is so popular in the yeshiva world. Because Baruch Hashem, we don't want our Talmidim to get divorced. So we say, learn Maseches Gittin. That way, you'll get your get inspiration, so to speak, from Maseches Gittin. That's answer number one. There is answer number two. Meaning the question is, how do I keep the 613? And that is Avat Yisrael. Now the question is, well, Avat Yisrael is a good thing, but how does that? Because like this, let's say a man puts on tefillin every day. He puts it on his arm. We don't describe that as my arm put on tefillin today. We describe that as I put on tefillin today because my arm is just part of me. Well, it all depends on how you define your me. Who is you? Who is me? Is me this? Or do I regard myself as a limb or even an atom in the cosmic body of Am Yisrael? Because Am Yisrael is a transcendental entity that has a past, present, future. And even if every individual unit has changed over, say, 100 years, right, 200 years, every Jew alive today was not alive 200 years ago. But still, same thing with your body. Every 10 years, all of your cells have changed, but you're the same person. Again, that's an interesting philosophical question of identity and everything else. Okay, but putting that aside, we would generally say you're the same person. So, even if I can't do a certain mitzvah, but if through Avat Yisrael I join myself to Klal Yisrael, and I perceive myself as a molecule or an atom connected to this body, then the mitzvos of the whole body of Am Yisrael become my mitzvos. The Kohen's mitzvos are my mitzvos. The Yisrael's mitzvos are the Kohen's mitzvos. Men, women, men. Beis HaMikdash, not Beis HaMikdash. I link myself to the cosmic entity. So yes, I as an individual cannot do so many mitzvot, but through the path of linkage, see, the linkage of Avat Yisrael is both horizontal and vertical. It's horizontal in the sense that I try to link up to every Jew, and it's vertical that I connect myself to the past generations that came before me. So these are two answers to this question. How can I keep Taryag mitzvot, since so many of them depend on conditions that I might not fulfill? Answer number one is Talmud Torah. Answer number two is the pathway of Avat Yisrael. This is the basic introduction. So now, says the Meshech Chochmah, these two pathways are alluded to in the two responses of the Jewish people. In Parshas Yisro, it says, Vayanu kol ha'am yachdav, underline yachdav. Everybody answered in unison. Yachdav, Kael asher diber Hashem nasa. Whatever Hashem said, we will do. That pasuk is referring to Am Yisrael in a state of unity, a state of togetherness, a state of love. When we are living with unity, togetherness, and love, we can indeed declare we can do the whole Torah. I can't do it, you can't do it, he can't do it, she can't do it. But as an achdus and a collectivity, we can do it. We could be Makayem the Torah ba'asiyah, with action. But in Parshas Mishpatim, the word Yachdav is omitted. It says V'yanu kalam. It doesn't say the word Yachdav. So the Torah is alluding to the fact that there will be times in Jewish history, maybe most of the times in Jewish history, where there's not going to be unity. There's not going to be togetherness. There'll be polarization. There will be machlokes. There will be dissension. At that point, I can't say I'm able to keep the Torah because I'm not connected to Am Yisrael. And I, as an individual, can't do everything. So how am I mashlim my neshama? With the light of Taryag. So we go to plan B, although I had mentioned it first. Karla Shadibra Hashem Nasa, whatever God says we can do, through Vanishma, through learning. Nishma is understanding. So, when there's a Yachdav, we keep the Torah by action. When there's not a Yachdav, we can only do it Nishma, through the process of learning and Talmud Torah. And therefore the two approaches are alluded to in the different formulation of those verses. And it's very meduyak why the word Yachdav only appears in the Asiyah Pasuk. In the V'nishma Pasuk, it's when there's not a Yachdav, and then you're Makayim it by Talmud Torah. So we have these two pathways. We have the pathway of Avas Yisrael, which is actually mentioned earlier, and we have the pathway of Talmud Torah, how each of us could keep the 613 mitzvahs. These look like two different roads. There's road A, road B, two different highways. But in point of fact, the two roads ultimately converge and become one. Because Chazal tell us, and in Eretz Yisrael we say this every day, the end of the Gemara in Brachos, Talmidei Chachamim Marbim Shalom Biolam. The study of Torah brings peace into the world. So when we're not a Yachdav, through the process of Torah learning, that actually brings us to Avas Yisrael. Now, I understand the obvious question that people will ask, and it's a question that, tortures me as well. Well, wait a second here. Torah learning is supposed to bring shalom into the world. So how come it's so often the case that the Torah learning creates machlokas among Jews? It's a good question. We might have to ask, can that be authentic Torah learning? Maybe I should have shut up the tape earlier. And that is, if Chazal say Torah learning brings peace into the world, and if Torah learning does not bring peace into the world, so you're either going to say Chazal are wrong, which we're not allowed to assume, or you're going to say, maybe there's something in our Torah learning that's not entirely proper. We have to ask ourselves those questions. I'm not going to answer them right now. I don't even have a good answer. But nevertheless, the point is that true Torah learning should create shalom in the world. And therefore, the two different pathways, what starts off as Avas Yisrael versus the pathway of Talmud Torah, ultimately come together into a single pathway. So, B'ezras Hashem, may we be zocha to combine both of these highways, and in that way, we will perfect our own neshamos by connecting it to the light of the 613 mitzvot, and we will also help bring redemption into a world that desperately needs the light of Hashem to redeem us, to elevate us, to bring us back to where we need to be. So, thank you.
Amen. Amen.